Daniels and whether David Pecker had any intention to be involved in an effort to silence her story. And just part of this exchange, Emil Bovey, Donald Trump's attorney, saying to Pecker, quote, "You did not consider Stormy Daniels' story to be a part of any agreement you had in August of 2015. Is that correct?" To which Pecker responds, "That's correct. You wanted nothing to do with it. It's that right?" David Pecker responded, "That's right." Of course, at the heart of the charges here of falsifying business records is specifically the Stormy Daniels payment and the reimbursement of Michael Cohen by Donald Trump. And what David Pecker is now saying is that he never intended to be a part of the Stormy Daniels story here in the first place. Another aspect of this here is the fact that they are going through some of the prior meetings that David Pecker had testified about. One of them that they are currently discussing now is David Pecker in January of 2017 walking into a Trump Tower meeting just weeks before Donald Trump was sworn in as president, a meeting that included the likes of Reince Priebus, the incoming chief of staff, Sean Spicer, and James Comey. And they are getting into the gritty details of exactly what David Pecker's role as a part of all of these meetings was and the extent to which Donald Trump was using these opportunities to ensure the silence of some of these key figures. Jose.
And this is a continuing issue, this meeting, as well as others. And Danny, I'm just wondering, let's talk about, there's been a focus this morning on McDougal specifically. Stormy Daniels is now appearing in the picture, but then there are these meetings, specifically that meeting in Trump's office in Trump Tower. What's the importance of that?
Here's the people's theory here, that David Pecker was involved in these catch-and-kill stories, including Karen McDougal and other catch-and-kill stories, that he was at meetings when these were discussed. But when it came to Stormy Daniels, he backed out for a reason that actually was, really silly, in that he was never reimbursed or never paid back, and also because he didn't want to get involved with a porn star, according to his own testimony, because of contracts he had with Walmart. That's why the people are calling him. What the defense is trying to do in cross-examination is create separation. Okay, there may have been this Karen McDougal arrangement. There may have been this 2015 meeting. There may have been this catch and kill with a doorman, but you were not involved in the whole Stormy Daniels saga, so therefore you don't have valuable information about that. Look, there are not a lot of options for cross-examination. I've been thinking about it entirely during his direct testimony. Where would the defense go? And they really can only go to some of the classics, which is his ability to remember, his motive in that he has an agreement or an immunity deal, to the extent he has an immunity deal with the prosecutors, and then specific to this, his lack of knowledge, maybe primarily dealing only with Michael Cohen and the meetings that really had to do with something else and not Stormy Daniels. They need to create that separation with the Stormy Daniels transactions to show that maybe Pecker doesn't know quite that much about the Stormy Daniels deal.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn, Trump has not been charged in connection to the payoff of Karen McDougal. Why is it being brought up at his trial, and why was the prosecution mentioning it early on?
Yeah, so what the prosecutors are doing, Jose, is they are setting the table, right? What they're doing is they're showing that Donald Trump, together with Michael Cohen and David Pecker, were involved in a conspiracy to conceal this information, ultimately to violate, or at least the product of it was a violation of campaign finance laws. David Pecker admitted as much. He knew he was doing it. So think about this. Even though these charges aren't directly at issue, because the prosecutors will move on to the Stormy Daniels hush money payments and the falsifying business records to cover them up. That's what's coming, sometime soon. What it shows is that Donald Trump, David Pecker, and Michael Cohen were happy to enter into a conspiratorial agreement to ultimately hide this information, and it was a violation of campaign finance laws. So this is table setting. This is like an appetizer to what will become the main course. And, Danny is exactly right. One of the ways they can go after David Pecker on cross is to say, wait a minute, you have a non-prosecution agreement. In other words, you did wrong, you violated the law, but you're not required to plead guilty to it, accept responsibility, and testify against Donald Trump. The prosecutors gave you a pass. So you're going to say anything that the prosecutors might want you to say to incriminate Donald Trump, because you really do value that non-prosecution agreement you got, in the hands of a skilled criminal defense attorney, like a Danny Savalas, there can be a lot of points scored before the jury with this kind of a non-prosecution agreement arrangement.
Kimberly, how do you see the story being told so far?
Yeah, I think that this is exactly right in terms of setting the table about how this took place with someone who was at the table. I also think with David Pecker, an important part of that story is, remember, paying hush money in itself and entering into an agreement to pay hush money in itself isn't a crime. And this is something that David Pecker has admitted that he's done with Donald Trump and others for some time. But you're going to see the story change when it comes to Stormy Daniels as to how it has been paid. It's a foundation being laid that, you know, Pecker asked how would it be paid. He was told it would be paid by the big guy, but then enter Michael Cohen, and he's paying it, and there's not the reimbursement, and that's how you get to the falsification of the business records. Because, of course, at that point, Donald Trump was a federal candidate for office, and that's when you get into the campaign finance violations. So some of the minutia or some of the details that are coming out now may not make sense, but once the story is put all together, it will form, according to the prosecutors, the basis of the crimes for which Donald Trump is charged.
And Vaughn, I mean, Michael Cohen's name has already been brought up quite a bit during the questioning so far. Right. What's that about?
Right, to the point about this being a sustained effort here and one that ultimately the defense will make sense of here. And a key facet of that is Michael Cohen's credibility. And just one example that was brought up here in the last few minutes was a back and forth going back before the 2016 election, in which the prosecution, I should say Donald Trump's defense team, was asking David Pecker about a side conversation he had with Michael Cohen, in which Michael Cohen allegedly wanted to meet up with Mark Cuban and have the National Enquirer, through David Pecker, send a photographer to go and film and take photographs of the two meeting up for the purposes of Donald Trump being envious of Michael Cohen meeting up with Mark Cuban. And that just hits at the credibility issue here that the defense team is trying to set up for the prosecution, and that Michael Cohen was not viewed as somebody who was thought highly of necessarily in the business community, but also somebody who was doing whatever it took, even if it meant having National Enquirer send a photographer to go and take a photograph of him, that this was somebody who could say a lot of things, yet when it comes to actual execution was not necessarily the most reliable or somebody that had the greatest veracity behind his stories and his claims.
Yeah, I mean, Danny, this is the defense taking a shot at Michael Cohen in a preemptive manner.
They have to, and they're going to throughout this trial, and that's why the people are lining up documents and witnesses that will corroborate Michael Cohen's story. Everyone knows that Michael Cohen has credibility issues. You know who knows that? The people. That's what they said at the outset. They're diffusing that bomb on the front end. It's a common tactic. If you have a cooperating witness, and often cooperating witnesses have lots of credibility issues, you get out ahead of it if you're the prosecution. So it doesn't look like you're hiding it when it comes out on cross. It lands with a fizzle when the defense brings it up, because the prosecution has been bringing it up the entire time. And to some degree, cross-examination of David Pecker is like a cooperating witness. He has credibility issues too, just not the same as Michael Cohen. By the way, take a step back here. The people's, one of their best witnesses, that they're asking the jury to believe, is the publisher of the National Enquirer. And he's also spent days testifying about how they got stories and published stories that were less than perfectly journalistically accurate. And yet, as Glenn will tell you, cooperating witnesses can be really believable when they take the stand and take an ownership of what they've been credible about and what they're not credible about. When they're forthcoming about their problems as well as what they say happened, they can be believable and they can overcome those credibility issues. Both Michael Cohen can too, depending on how he testifies. But he's got a lot more credibility issues than David Pecker.
Again, I think some may be surprised to learn through this process that paparazzi were being sent to meetings when there was no interest in it, and maybe that the Martians maybe weren't real, that we're selling our groceries. But interesting also to see, Vaughn, how right now there is that attempt by the defense to damage the credibility of David Pecker, specifically on things he said about Donald Trump and whether Donald Trump thanked him or did not thank him.
Right. That January 2017 meeting that we were talking about at Trump Tower, right when we first got on the show, Jose, in which David Pecker testified that he went to Trump Tower there, and just after a meeting that Donald Trump had with the likes of James Comey, Reince Priebus, Sean Spicer, and others there, just about 2 weeks before he was sworn in as president, David Pecker replaced all of those individuals and had testified this week that is where Donald Trump had thanked him for purchasing the rights to Dino the Doorman story, as well as Karen McDougal's story. That was previous testimony of David Pecker just this week in answering questions from the prosecution. But now, presently, under cross-examination by Donald Trump's defense team, they are going back to old transcripts that David Pecker, when he was talking with federal investigators back in July of 2018, contended that in that very meeting at Trump Tower in January 2017, that he did not actually recall Donald Trump thanking him or AMI for purchasing Dino the Doorman story or Karen McDougal's story. And that is the current line of questioning that is currently underway of David Pecker, asking him about that distinction of why back in 2018, just 1 year after this supposed meeting, he couldn't recall the fact that he had been thanked by Donald Trump. But now here in the year of 2024, he is saying that actually I was thanked by Donald Trump for purchasing the rights to those stories. So again, this is hitting at the credibility or at least the recallability of David Pecker as such a crucial witness for the prosecution.
Everyone stay with us, because up next, prosecutors say Trump keeps racking up gag order violations. We're going to take a look at why Judge Merchan hasn't issued a ruling on that yet. Plus, what the Supreme Court justices had to say about presidential immunity and what it could mean for Trump's federal election trial. We're back in 60 seconds. You're watching Jose Diaz Balart Reports on MSNBC.
When you purchase a pair of Bombas socks, tees, or underwear, you also donate one to someone facing homelessness. One purchased equals one donated. 100 million donations and counting. Visit bombas.com and get 20% off your first order.
Over 13 million Americans were affected by identity theft in 2022, and the threats are more than you realize. If you're a victim of identity theft, LifeLock works to fix it on your behalf, backed by the $1 Million Protection Package. Enroll now.
Weeds, they have you surrounded. Take your lawn back! With Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action, it gets 3 jobs done at once. Kills weeds, prevents crabgrass, and keeps it growing strong.
Download the MyLawn app today for lawn care tips and customized plans.
Feed your lawn. Feed it.
There's nothing better than a Subway Series footlong, except when you add a new footlong sidekick, like the ultimate BMT with the new footlong pretzel. Nothing like a sidekick that steps up in crunch time.
Not cool, man.
Every epic footlong deserves a perfect sidekick.
15 past the hour, and right now the court is in a break in Donald Trump's hush money criminal trial in New York City.